it's not telling them the journey and letting them go on it on their own and seeing what mistakes they make. It's taking them with you. That's all that leadership is. And if you can get that into your head, then I think you will be a much more effective leader.
Welcome to this week's bonus edition of the John Norman Leadership Podcast, bringing you great content on the last Thursday of every month. And be sure to hit subscribe. Every time we create more content, it will go directly to you. Just want to add a little context to today's podcast. We are still in the middle of a global pandemic. So the guest today and the things we're talking about is to really help us navigate through this tricky time. And I want to say a special welcome to our guest today, great friend, great dad, great husband and leader, Jake Humphreys. Jake is a dynamic leader and a great communicator. He is best known for being the main sports presenter with BT, formerly on Formula One. However, Jake is also a business owner with his production agency Whisper TV. He also has his own leadership podcast, High Performance Leadership, and we'll give you more details on that later in the show. But really is an honor and a privilege to have Jake with us on the show today. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Thanks, mate. Lovely to see you. What kind words? Did my wife write those for you?
Yeah, she sent them in this morning. No, just kidding. Yeah. So yeah, it really is an honor to have you here. And
Thanks.
You have faced many leadership lessons throughout a very successful career, Jake. And I want to just really dig into some of those lessons and really find out some of the education that you've gone through. So how are you, first of all?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks very much. Yeah, I feel extremely blessed to be living in the beautiful Norfolk countryside during what, as you have already mentioned, is a really difficult time. And I am a firm believer in always looking for the positive if you can find it. And there was definitely some huge challenges relating to the coronavirus, both professionally and personally. But I feel that as we sort of slowly creep out of this, that things are in a good place. And I really hope that I hope many other people are able to have that same experience.
Yeah, and this podcast, like your podcast, Jake, is aim to equip and empower leaders to lead better in whatever the sphere, whether it is in the sporting world, whether it's in, in business, the arts, and you're a high capacity leader. How have you managed to keep yourself well through what has probably been one of the most unsettling seasons we've ever faced?
I think it comes back to the core values that my parents gave me growing up. And there was two things that they gave me as a kid. And it's a sort of family phrase that we used then, and it's a family phrase I use with my kids now. And it is roots and wings. And I think that as a parent, the number one thing you can equip your child with is both of those. And my parents did that for me. So they gave me the wings to go out and to believe that anything was possible, and to go to London as a kid from a small village in Norfolk, just to go off and believe I could be a TV presenter and end up working for the BBC and then BT Sport and all of those amazing things. But at the same time, the roots are what connects you to the really important fundamentals of your life. And for me, the fundamentals of my life, the single most important things, are my great friends and my great family. And that was why moving back to Norfolk was probably one of the most important things that we did as a family. We came back home in 2016, and I'd been in London since 1999. So I'd been in London the best part of 20 years. So I'd actually spent more time in London than I had in Norfolk, where we live now. But we just felt that amongst the kind of, living in my world is a little bit like going to the fun fair. Like, it's brilliant and it's bright and light and loud and there's loads of attractions everywhere you look. But at the same time, after a couple of hours in the fun fair, you can get quite tired, all right? And you want to go home. And we felt like that. And it's lovely now that we get to dip into that fun fair, but then also come back. And I think my advice to anyone listening to this is to absolutely live your dreams, to be expansive, to do the stuff you've always dreamed of, to absolutely have no limitations. But just make sure that at the centre of it, whatever is right at the middle of it is real. Like, you can't have what I would describe as quite transient relationships, which is what you get in broadcasting, because I was fully plugged into my life at Kids TV, then I was fully plugged into Formula One, now I'm fully plugged into football. And I think it's something we all have to accept, right, is that relationships come and go. You can't hold on to relationships forever. And there's no bad thing, and we shouldn't be worried about that. You should accept that that's the way the world works, and that people will pass through your lives, and you will lift each other up, and you'll give each other great things, and you will go one way and they will go another, and that is cool. But make sure at the center of it is that foundation that never leaves, which are those lifelong friends and your family. And with that, I kind of feel relatively invincible, that as long as I've got what I call true honesty at home, then I'm okay.
Yeah, I've heard that said, that success begins at home, and it's so true. Success isn't just what you have, but who you have in your life. And I think you've proven that, Jake. And personally, what's COVID taught you? What has that taught you as an individual, as a leader?
I think it's taught me a lot about the people around me. Broadcasting and TV can be pretty ruthless, and we've always tried to do the right thing. And I think that we live in a world now where it's almost never been harder to be yourself, because it's never been easier for everyone to pass an opinion about you because of social media and all the other things. So there's always a lot of talk on social media. People are always telling you what they're going to do and what they think. And I think we have to be very careful about comparing a whole spectrum and a whole picture of our own lives to other people's very carefully curated 15-second edits of what their life looks like, and thinking, hold on a minute, why is that life so amazing and mine isn't? Well, guess what? You're not seeing their life. You're comparing reality to created content. So we've got to be very careful there. And that's why I've always tried to say to the guys at my production company, Whisper, and the people in my life and the people I work with, is that it's not about what we say, it's about what we do. That is the single most important thing. And when the coronavirus pandemic hit, and I'll be totally frank and open here, our production company, which produces primarily sports content, overnight we lost tens of millions of pounds worth of income. But we've got almost 100 people relying on us to pay their mortgages. And the single most important thing for us is that those people still had a job and still had a company to come and work for at the end of the shutdown. And to his incredible credit, our CEO, a guy called Sunil Patel, he immediately said, right, I'm going to take no salary. And he isn't a multi-millionaire or anything like that. He earns a good wage, but he said, right, I'm going to take nothing, because there will be staff here who are really financially struggling. Either they'll be earning less or their partners are earning less. So for the whole shutdown, I take no salary, and what I would have earned gets passed around to the people at Whisper who need it.
Incredible.
And then I put aside a pot of my own money, and I just sent a sort of direct message, a video actually, to all of the staff at Whisper, and it was shared to each of them individually, just to say, look, whatever's going on in your world, just pick up the phone, speak to me, because if it is financial, then I know that we can do something about that. We can take away some of that pain. So please don't be embarrassed. Don't be too proud. Let's have a conversation. And I'm happy to pass my money to you to make your life easier in what is a really difficult time. And then finally, on the mental health side, which is really important for us at Whisper, we're part owned by Sony, and they have a really strong and well-run, well-funded mental health program, and they allowed us full access to that. So it basically became about protecting and looking after our people, and I'm really proud, because I think that when times are good, everyone can do good things, because it's easy to do good things when times are good. When it's difficult, I think that's the true test of people, and I was very, very proud of how, as a business, particularly with our leader, Sunil, how we came through.
Yeah, it's brilliant, Jake, and full credit to the way you've handled and led that. I think it's going to inspire other leaders to go, hey, this is a way that we can keep people on board, and the respect and the loyalty that you're going to gain through that leadership. So just we're going to change angles a little bit. We live in a society that craves instant success, and we both know, Jake, that leadership isn't sexy. In fact, it's hard work, and many people wouldn't be aware of your journey. They would just see your success. Can you paint a picture a little bit of where you've come from, and maybe some of the setbacks, the knockbacks that you've experienced, so people can really understand not just the Jake they see on TV or the Jake they see on social media, but actually the sacrifices and how long and how far it's taken you to get where you're at?
I mean, my first message to people would be embrace failure. I often say, fail often, fail early, and fail forwards. And it's really important. Failing early is key, because when you start on a journey, if it's the wrong one, you need to fail quickly to realise you need to change your path. Failing often is also vital, because as soon as you stop failing often, it means that basically you're not pushing yourself into that really important part of your life where actually failure is almost inevitable. You need to get really, really comfortable with failure. You need to accept it, and you need to know it's going to happen. So you fail early, you fail often, but crucially you fail forwards. So you learn from the failure.
Yeah,
that's the most important one, is fail forwards. And really, failure creates success. My entire life has been built on failing. And there'll be people listening to this going, yeah, but I don't really understand how failure improves you. And I always use the analogy of being in the gym. Like, what does your personal trainer say? Right, I want you to finish off, I want you to do curls to failure. Well, why does he ask you to do that? Because the failure is where the growth is. That's where you're building the muscles. That's where you're building your armour, where you're pushing yourself forward. So you might manage 6 on the Wednesday and you fail at 6, and on the Friday you're back in the gym and you manage 8. And then a week later you manage 12. Good. And it's the failure that's helped you to grow. And really, John, my entire career, my life has been built on failure. And I have failed often, but I've made sure I've always fell forwards.
Wow.
So I failed my A-levels. I got an E, an N and a U. The day that I returned to school, I had a letter from a local TV company called Rapture Television. And they were looking for media students or politics students to go in and be on a TV show. Now, if I hadn't failed my A-levels, I'd have been with the many thousands of other people studying media at university, but I wasn't. I was back at school, and before I knew it, I was doing work experience at a place called Rapture Television. They then offered me a job, and I remember it vividly, £5,750 a year I was earning. And I never went to university. I went straight from passing my A-levels second time around, because I learnt from the failure, and got a job at Rapture, and that led me to going to the BBC in London and working on kids telly. But then again, I had a big conversation with someone at BBC Sport in about 2007, where I said I really want to be the next Des Lynam. I want to be the sports presenter for the BBC. And we had a conversation, and it transpired that I didn't have any journalistic qualifications. I'd never played sport to a high level, and the parting words from the person were, "We don't employ people like you." Now, that leads me on to the next lesson.
Wow.
And this is something that I'm really, really hot on, and I'd love to just talk about it for a couple of minutes. Fault versus responsibility. We spend our lives looking for excuses. We spend our lives searching for fault. And I'm talking about fault that is absolutely not your fault, but it's still your responsibility to deal with the setback.
So good.
So whether you suffer an injury that means you can't be a top-level sports person, whether you suffer a personal trauma or a relationship breakdown, whether you have always dreamed of an amazing job and you don't get it, whether you have real issues with people in the workplace, whether you're in a financial situation where you don't believe that you can go and achieve what you want to, many of those things, if not all of those things, might not be your fault. But they're absolutely your responsibility to still deal with them. And I understand that sometimes that can feel almost quite harsh and quite brutal, but it's because there's no benefit to not taking responsibility. Because as soon as you say, right, I am not 100% responsible for my life, you're effectively giving up control. And I'm not saying that any of these things are your fault. And it's not about looking for blame. It's about really moving beyond blame. So you never blame anyone, not even yourself. There is no blame attributed. It's about taking the responsibility to still live the life you want, achieve the dreams that you want, and get where you want to go. So let's be quite frank, I didn't work hard enough for my A-levels, right? But there was no point me attaching fault to myself or anybody else for my A-level failure. The responsibility was on dealing with that and moving forward. It wasn't really my fault that the lady that I spoke to said to me, "We don't employ people like you." But it was still my responsibility to deal with that. There was no point me dwelling on what she'd said and blaming her and apportioning blame to somebody else. Because all you're doing, if you don't take 100% responsibility for every, and I mean every tiny facet of your life, if there's someone difficult around you, blame yourself. Take responsibility for how you can deal with that person better and make it a positive experience dealing with them. And I'm not talking about taking responsibility for 50% of your time, 75% of your time, or even 99% of your time. I'm talking about taking responsibility for 100% of your life, every tiny, minuscule part of your life. Because as soon as you do that, then you're in control. And once you're in control, then you can achieve whatever you like. At that point, success simply becomes a choice.
How do you personally respond when you make a mistake? Because obviously, you have obviously made mistakes on live television, and you put your foot in it or forgot to say something. How do you internalize that, and then how do you respond? Because people are listening to this, leaders, leading businesses, leading churches, and we make mistakes. We're human. But how can we get up again? How do we respond?
So I love a new day. And I'm really good at saying, right, that was awful. I've had a bad day. I've messed up. But I think I know what I did wrong. I definitely am not going to do that again. It doesn't mean I'm not going to fail again, because I'll fail at something else. But I won't make that same failure again. And tomorrow morning, when I wake up, the rest of my life is ahead of me. And that's a great thing.
Would you be honest enough to admit a mistake you've made? A big
100%.
one?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. You have to, John. Otherwise, how are you ever learning? And I definitely daily make mistakes. Yeah. Definitely. Make mistakes every single day. I say things every day and think, maybe I shouldn't have said that.
So refreshing to hear a leader of your caliber and the influence you have, just putting your hands up and say, hey, I'll make mistakes. It's really going to help a lot of people. You just touched on social media there. How do you handle that? So you make a mistake, you're traveling home, say from Anfield, you're flicking through your phone and someone, we won't use the profanities, but you've showed me them. I see the barrage of abuse that you get. How do you handle that?
I would say it's the single biggest source of stress in my life.
Wow.
Social media, sort of criticism and aggression and people relishing in other people's failure. Sometimes I wish I could say to them, listen, I don't mind, because you are relishing and loving the fact that I failed, but I know that that's not a bad thing, that I've made a mistake, and I won't make the same mistake again. I just think it's really sad that we live in a world where people are sitting and waiting to go and have a pop at somebody. And the best bit of advice I was ever given, and I always give this advice now to other people on social media, is that it's not about you. So when someone sees me make a mistake on the television and they just come at me and say, oh, you said this, or you were biased against this team, or you messed up your words, or you didn't get this fact right, or whatever, it's not about me. But in the sort of spirit of taking responsibility, I've decided that my responsibility is to counteract the negativity. So you will probably see across my social media, will ever, either very rarely, but if I do it, then it's a mistake. I hope to never put something out that is a direct hit or a go or a pop at somebody, because I like to think that I can add to the positivity on those platforms.
Yeah, and if you don't follow Jake, you need to follow him on his Twitter and his Instagram, because every morning you wake up, there's a positive message. It's a word of encouragement to get you going. I know it helps me. Do you think what you just said not just translates over social media, but also in the workplace? So when people are angry at work, in the office, I know a lot of people are working from home at the moment, but when you've got someone maybe who doesn't respond well in the office, do you think, again, it's not so much about you as the leader, but maybe what's going on in them, and we again have that responsibility not almost to get sucked into that vacuum? Yeah.
And if there are leaders in workplaces listening to this, and there are people in those workplaces that are negative or aren't adding to a positive vibe, or they're not driving the business in the right direction, don't blame them. Blame yourself. Take the responsibility, because you're the leader in that place. And I used to think that leadership was one thing, then I realised it was something else. I used to think that leadership was being in charge, making the decisions, telling people the direction we're going to go in, and using a phrase which is pretty common in football, which is FIFO, fit in or F off, right? That's what I used to think leadership was about. You create a culture and you fit in or you don't. I don't believe that anymore. I believe that leadership, and this is the single biggest leadership lesson from my perspective, leadership is simply taking people on the journey with you. It's not telling them the journey and letting them go on it on their own and seeing what mistakes they make. It's taking them with you. That's all that leadership is. And if you can get that into your head, then I think you will be a much more effective leader.
So good, Jake. And we're going to kind of bring this to a close now, but you're a business owner, and we've talked about some of the challenges. We've talked about some of your response to those challenges, but how are you staying optimistic? And what would you say to people, maybe literally they're hanging on right now to their business, maybe their staff have been furloughed, and it really is, it's tough for people out there?
I would say that, first of all, I stand with you and I understand how difficult this is at the moment, and there are real, genuine challenges. However, the single biggest thing you can do in a situation like this is talk and share and seek solutions. What you can't do is sit and wait for this to blow over. You have to take action. Again, it really comes back to 100% responsibility. So if you're a leader in any field and you have issues, make today the day you deal with those issues. Don't just think, I think over time things will get better. Sit down. And one of the great lessons that I've learned over the years from high performing individuals is that they're trying to get from A to Y, but they're going to have to go through every letter to get there. It's not about going from A to Y in one step. It's about going to B, then to C, then to D, then to E. So sit down and go, right, what do I want? What's the source of my stress? What's the issue with my business? What's the problem in front of me? Right, I know what it is. It's that. But I can't go from where I am to there. I can't solve this in one step. So what are the small incremental steps that I'm going to take? One of the phrases that is used a lot in Formula One, John, is marginal gains, which is breaking everything in your world down to 1,000 pieces. And instead of trying to improve the whole thing in one go, break it down to 1,000 pieces and improve each of those 1,000 pieces. When you put it all back together, will you find that there's 1,000 better things suddenly, just because you've broken it down? So please, break your life and your business and your issues down into small chunks. Deal with those small chunks. But also, speak to people. Now, this might be slightly unrealistic in some people's eyes. I choose, though, to believe that we have never lived in a better world. I think that we have a perception that it's no better than it's ever been, because I think that the media love to feed us with negative news stories, and I guess it's almost inside us to want to hear those negative news stories, because it's almost in our psyche as human beings to want to know what's bad so I can avoid what's bad. It's written into us. It's the survival instinct, right?
Yeah.
But there is loads of good out there. There's loads that has to improve. There's loads that has to be better. We're seeing still horrendous things happening around the world, but there is so much good as well. And I like to believe that most people are good people, wanting to do good things for their friends, their family, and their community. And you can find them. If you seek them out and you have a great personal relationship with them, then you can find those people and they will help you. So I wish you all the positivity in the world. I wish you all the blessings. I wish you all the luck. And I promise you that if you take 100% responsibility, if you accept failure, if you take people with you, if you create personal relationships, then you will be okay.
Absolutely fantastic. We're going to finish here, but just before we do, you've recently launched an incredible leadership podcast, High Performance, and we're going to put the links on the podcast so people can view or watch on my channel. But tell us a little bit more about the podcast, the vision you have for it moving forward, and ways people can engage.
Yeah, thanks, John. You can follow us on High Performance on Instagram, or you can find me, Jake Humphrey, on Instagram. And really, the High Performance podcast is the years that I've spent with high-performing individuals. I just love spending time with sports people who operate at an incredibly high level. And I think that everyone can learn from it. It's not a secret, they're just tricks and tips. And I want people to listen to the pod and feel they can live a more high-performance life for it. So it's relatively simple. Because I'm no expert, I have Damien Hughes, who is a professor alongside me. He is an expert in high-performing cultures. He's an amazing guy, and we host it together. And it's been, as you mentioned at the start, it's currently the number one sports pod in India, South Africa, across huge swathes of the Caribbean, lots of countries in Europe. So I think people want this. They want this positivity, and that's my final message. Just spread positivity. What's the point putting anything negative out there? Don't feed the negativity.
So good, Jake. And yeah, I think what's happened today is we lifted the level of our leadership, others are going to rise around us. So really do appreciate your time, your honesty, transparency, and just, depositing such gold on the listeners today and the viewers. So thanks, mate. Appreciate it. All the best. We're cheering you on your journey as well. God bless, mate.
Love you. Top man. Thank you so much, John.
I'd value your commitment by liking it, sharing it, subscribing to it, commenting on it, and sharing it with your teams. Remember, you are your only limit, and this podcast is to lift the level of your leadership, and as you rise, others will rise around you.